What's up, Wizards? It's Dev from the place SBMTG, buying for people who generally like Magic. But anyway, what we're going to do today and all week, we're going to set aside all week actually, to look through these Dominaria leaks, spoilers, leaks, previews, whatever you want to call them. They were the result of an honest mistake, from my understanding. I've heard it both ways, that a Chinese distributor accidentally released the release notes for Dominaria, which included all of these cards, when they were supposed to release Masters 25 release notes. But I've also heard it said that Wizards did that. So I don't know what's real anymore. I'm not really sure. But Wizards has handled it really well up until now. And at first, I wasn't going to talk about these for a good long while. But everybody else is. You know, Saffron Olive talked about it, and like everyone on Twitter is talking about it. And Frank Karsten just released the deck list like today along with an article. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure that we should talk about it because everybody else is, and we can't stick our head in the sand on it. So I'm going to go ahead and do a more sort of stripped down thing in the interest of time here. And all week, I'm just going to go through the colors one by one and tell you what I think about all these different new Dominaria cards. And some of them are really good. And I'll be honest, just before we get into it here, at first I was a little bit down on the set. Just literally the first day I looked at them. But the more I look at these, the more excited I'm getting, actually. I think this is, at the end of the day, a really good-looking set. So I'm excited to go through these with you and let you know how I feel. And get down there in the comment section. Let me know if I miss anything or how you feel about these. I'm sure there's 1,000 interactions that either I or a bunch of other people haven't thought of yet. So get down there in the comments. You might be the first person to come up with a crazy interaction that no one's thought of yet. So, but without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get into the white cards. White's first on the color pie. And go through these sort of one by one, starting with, you guys ready? Hope you're ready. We're going to start with Urza's Ruinous Blast here. This is 5 mana, 4 and a white for a legendary sorcery. Check that out. It's mythic. Apparently. And you can, here's the deal with legendary sorceries. You can only cast a legendary sorcery if you have a legendary creature or planeswalker out. And in this case, what you'll do when you cast URB, Herb, is you'll exile all non-land permanents that aren't legendary, which really sounds good. That especially sounds awesome alongside like a Gideon of the Trials. Neat little combo there. And, you know, there's like the deck I was talking about, Frank Karsten chair, was a green-white legendary deck. And that seemed pretty sweet looking. And Urza's Ruinous Blast would obviously be a great card in that deck. Urza's Ruinous Blast doesn't really like roll off the tongue. I'm just going to keep calling it Herb. But Herb looks good in that deck. But you got to keep thinking, you know, it doesn't take out really important stuff that whole decks are built around. Like it doesn't take out Hazaret, Scarab God, doesn't take out Planeswalkers at all. Heart of Kirin, Pia, Nalar, Karizev, and like more edge cases like Rishkar and Monuments and Mavrin Fane. And added to that is the fact that Wizards, apparently as part of these release notes, Wizards has said that there's going to be a legend in like every single pack of Dominaria, which is pretty sweet for Commander players, but a legend in every single pack makes this card a little bit less valuable too. So we'll have to see what happens with the meta, but just in a vacuum the card looks ridiculous, obviously, but how the meta shapes up is really going to determine how good this card is. So I'll withhold judgment for now, right? But on its face, the card looks pretty extreme. So I'll give it a thumbs up, but I do think that it's possible the card does almost zilch. You know, it really depends on what happens with this format. There's going to be a lot of legends about, just so you know. But anyway, we're on our way here. Number 2 is Benalish Marshal. This is just 3 white mana. There's actually a cycle of cards. The only one we don't have yet is the black one, but each color gets a card that costs 3 of its respective color, and that's ridiculous, but they're all pretty good. Benalish Marshal is 3 white mana for a 3/3 human knight, with other creatures you control get +1/+1. And I kind of like this. Obviously, in mono-white decks, this will be very easy to get. And it looks like White Weenie's back for a couple of reasons. This is not the only one. But this is a great card to play in White Weenie, although I don't necessarily like Anthem effects on creatures. They're usually really fragile. Your opponent can mess with them. You know, you go to swing in, your opponent removes your Benalish Marshal, and suddenly your combat math is all wrong. So sometimes I'm a little down, honestly, on Anthem effects that are creatures. They're so removable, but this looks really powerful in a mono-white aggro deck, so I'll give it a pass. I think this is probably a really good card, but just like we'll see with all of these, you know, it costs 3 mana of its color cards. I think maybe it's just outside the cusp of like real, true competitive power level. Although it could show up in a competitive deck, don't get me wrong. I just don't think it's going to be like one of the strongest cards in the format, obviously. So we're going to move on to Knight of Grace here. Love this card. There's actually two new knights that are meant to obviously call back to both white and black knight, and they both look really good. Rather than having protection from a color, which Wizards has just decided to nix completely. As of a couple of years ago now, it's been a while. I should read you the rest of the card. These are 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 2/2 first strike, hexproof from black. And it gets +1/+0 as long as any player controls a black permanent. You included, which I think is actually really, really cool, because black-white aggro decks are actually looking pretty sweet. Hexproof from black is actually really relevant just because it can't be hit by Fatal Push. That's super important in this format. And it can't be hit by, I guess, a little bit more niche but still played stuff like Moment of Craving, obviously important, or Essence Extracted or any of that stuff. But Fatal Push is obviously the most important case to point out. And I think it kind of makes it better than its black one, at least as far as Hexproof from black is concerned, or Hexproof from a color. I think Hexproof from black is more desirable than Hexproof from white, all in all. I really like these. They harken back to Black and White Knight and like Order of the Ebon Hand and Order of Leaper and stuff. So really another thumbs up there, especially for the nostalgia factor, but it also looks like a really good card in function too. So big fan of that. Moving on though, here's Dub, which is an unfortunate name for a card. I know they mean like a knight, but it makes me think of rims and stuff. I don't know. So Dub is 3 mana. It's 2 and a white for an enchantment. It's an aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2, has first strike, and is a knight in addition to its other types. I think this looks probably good in limited, but nowhere near constructed. If you're going to play a 3 mana aura, that's white especially, Squire's Devotion looks like a much, much better card. Especially for what Squire's Devotion and things like this are supposed to do. They hold off the game against aggro. And Squire's Devotion just does that 100 times better than something like Dub. And Squire's Devotion only sees, 2 of sideboard play in 1 deck blue-white auras and nothing else. So obviously I don't think we have to talk about this card too long, but maybe it's a fine aura in draft. And I think that there is an auras deck shaping up. We'll talk about that more as we go through white and blue tomorrow, but I think there's an auras deck shaping up in limited that looks pretty good, and Dub might be a part of it. But moving on, there's Dauntless Bodyguard. This guy's awesome. He's just 1 white mana for a 2/1 human knight, and as he enters the battlefield, you choose another creature you control. If you sacrifice Dauntless Bodyguard, the chosen creature will gain indestructible until end of turn. That is really hot. I like that white now has, in standard, 8 playable, well, you can play 8 1 mana 2 power guys, and that's super awesome. That's going to make weenie decks really, really good. And both those 2 power 1-drops, this and Sky Marcher Aspirant, are still pretty relevant in the late game. Aspirant will gain flying, be more likely to get through, and Bodyguard is going to be awesome in combat situations, and when it loses relevance, can just protect a bigger creature from a removal spell or from a bad combat situation. That's super sweet, and it's really good against like Fumigate and Bontu's Last Reckoning and some other sweepers. There's a new black sweeper that people are relatively hype about already, and it does look good. So there's that. But that also this would be effective against. So this looks amazing. This looks like one of the better 1 mana 2/1s that we've literally ever seen. It's like Aspirant and Kithion and this, kind of the short list. Like, this is that good looking to me. So I'm looking out for Dauntless Bodyguard. I really like White Weenie. I love White Aggro as an archetype. Have since 1995. So I'm really interested in some of these, White Aggro pieces. And Dauntless Bodyguard's like at the top of my list for cards I'm excited about for that deck. So yes. Yay, that card exists. But next, we have a legend. This is Teshar, Ancestor's Apostle. It's 4 mana, 3 and a white for a 2/2 bird cleric. It's legendary. And it's got flying. And whenever you cast a historic spell, we'll get to that in a second, return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Historic cards are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. We'll talk about sagas in a second, too, if you haven't heard about them yet. We'll get to those relatively soon. But basically, artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. Those are all historic cards. So whenever you cast any of those, you can get a creature with converted mana cost 3 or less back from your graveyard. Just put it straight on the battlefield. That's actually pretty sweet. The card reads like jank the first couple of times you read it. You're like, oh, that's probably a bulk rare. And it may very well be a bulk rare, but it seems like decks like Cheerios, or really any deck that plays like small creatures and sacrifices them, like Aristocrats maybe, but there's plenty of other combo decks that might do something like this, or like something like this. You go pseudo-infinite. And I'm sure there's ways to go infinite with it, actually, but there's pseudo-infinite things you can do, too. At least in standard. Like, I'm just a Restoration Specialist is probably a good place to start, you know? So, I like this. We'll have to see what gets built around it, what we can do with it. But at first glance, after having read it a couple of times, I like it a lot more than the first time I read it. And you start to realize more and more about this card the more you read it. So, I think there's going to be really cool interactions. And Restoration Specialist is just the beginning. I think there's going to be way more stuff you can do with this. So keep your eye on it. It may well be better than it reads at first. And then there's Invoke the Divine. This is next. This is another card that looks like trash, but the more I think about it, this isn't bad. Invoke the Divine is 3 mana. It's 2 and a white for an instant. Destroy target artifact or enchantment, you gain 4 life. Now, people were playing Appetite for the Unnatural in green sideboards. And that's pretty much the exact same card, but you gain half the life. So this is probably pretty decent. I think it's better than Forsake the Worldly as far as a comparable card, but I don't know if it's as good as Fragmentize, which does see a lot of sideboard play now. I do think that, you know, obviously Fragmentize doesn't kill Godfarer's Gift, and this does, so that's going to be a big edge. And this might be good specifically against Mardu vehicles, where you can bust Bomat Couriers and, I guess more relevantly, a Heart of Kirans with this and gain a huge chunk of life back. And that would be that would be great tempo against Mardu vehicles. So I actually think that this might be more relevant than it looks at first glance too. But up next, let me take a sip here. Sorry guys. Feels good. Anyway, this actually is one of my favorite looking cards in this, at least in white. This card looks really, really cool to me. This is Quinde, Pride of Femerif. It's 4 mana, 3 and a white for a 2/2 legendary human knight with double strike. And creatures you control with first strike have double strike. This is actually insane looking to me. This is awesome. Like a quick just search for first strike creatures. Shows a lot of really good ones, like there's Cartouche of Solidarity. Will give the creature that it enchants first strike, so that's cool. Toolcraft Exemplar is a great example. Direfleet Daredevil, Gearshift Ace is an interesting example. I actually put that card up on screen. I haven't been doing that much this video, but with more obscure stuff, I'll put them up on screen for you. And Gearshift Ace, it's a little edge, but it's kind of cool. Kari Zev, this makes C red actually a really cool looking card. Think about that. Emissary of Sunrise. You know, if you can actually get it to 3 power, it could be a good 3-drop to play before you play Quinde. Same thing with a card that you've probably never heard of, Retcrop Spearmaster. That's probably the way to get the best damage output out of this. You can hit with Retcrop for 8 damage on turn 4 if you play Quinde, which is sweet. And my favorite actually is Siege Modification and Dreadnought, Consulate Dreadnought. Because if you play, turn 1 or 2 Dreadnought into turn 3 Siege Modification, that's always been the dream. But now, on turn 4, you can go Quinde and just hit for 20 with your Consulate Dreadnought. So that seems pretty hot right there. And then, obviously, any first strike creatures in this set, like we just covered the new White Knight, Quinde would work pretty well with it, too. So, actually, I think there's a lot of really cool interactions. And I haven't even gone over all of them. There's a Rigging Runner and some other stuff, too, that has first strike. That I think Quinde is kind of cool. As long as you make it to your attack step and swing with creatures and stuff before he dies, he can actually have relevance the first turn that he's in play. You don't even have to swing with him. He can have relevance on turn 4 the moment you play him. So I actually think this is really, really cool, and I want to brew up some stuff. And I think it's going to be an important 4-drop if Knights is even close to a thing. And I hope it is. I like Knights as a creature type, always have. So I've actually got my eye on this. I don't have super high hopes for it or anything, but I think there are a lot of really, really cool interactions just with what we know so far about the format with Quinde. So I like the card a lot. I think it's cool. But anyway, enough gushing. Let's move on to another legend. There's going to be a bunch of these, just so you know. But another legend. This is Evra, Halcyon Witness. It's 6 mana, 4 and 2 white for a 4/4 legendary avatar. I love that we get an avatar back. This is one of my favorite creature types. Anyway, it's got lifelink, and you can pay 4 to exchange your life total with Evra's power. So this is really cute. Thought experiment. If you're at your, this is obviously Christmas land, but if you're at your starting life total, then you can switch your life total with its power. You'll go down to 4, but it's got lifelink, so when it swings in, even if a creature blocks it, then you'll go right back up to 24, and you'll have a 20/20 lifelinker. So that seems pretty sweet, and it's still worth it, even if you're at like 8 or 10 life when you switch power. You'll still get a sizable chunk, and you'll have a relatively big lifelink creature out. So I think this is really cool, but is it standard playable? I don't know. It costs 6 mana. It doesn't really do much other than block the turn it comes into play, and you probably won't be at a great life total against a lot of decks by the time you actually get this down, unless you're dedicated to playing it on turn 4 or whatever with ramp. So, and at that point, there's just better stuff you could probably be doing, like Carnage Tyrant or something. So, I don't know. This probably will live on in budget decks and casual decks, but it does look really cool. That's hard to deny. So, if you just fire off one attack step with it after you've exchanged your life total with its power, then you're probably going to be in a really good situation given that it survives that attack step. But if it doesn't, like if they remove it after you switch its power with your life total, then you're in a really bad situation. So, I can definitely see the potential for getting blown out here, but I mean, high risk, high reward. Go big or go home. Card looks pretty sweet, but is it good? Remains to be seen. Up next, though, is Lyra Dawnbringer. That would be cool, but Lyra Dawnbringer is 5 mana, 3 and 2 white for a 5/5 legendary angel with flying, first strike, and lifelink. That's a lot of abilities. And other angels you control get +1/+1 and have lifelink. This thing is pretty ridiculous looking on its face. And yeah, I'm not going to trash the card here or anything because the thing looks ridiculous. And it's going to be a great like angel commander too. I'm not going to take that away from it. But you compare it to other 5-drops in the format. And there's a couple of things I don't like about this thing's mana cost, or at least other Angels' mana cost. Like Angel of Invention, you want to play it alongside this, but they both cost 5. Angel of Sanctions, you want to play it along this, but they both cost 5. That's dumb. So all the cool Angels are 5 mana. So you can't play 12 5-drops. So what are you going to do? But there's also like Regal Caracal. And as far as other colors 5-drops, there's like Glorybringer, which won't kill this, so this is unglory-bringerable, so that's kind of cool. So I guess there's that. And it kills like Aethersphere Harvester, that's probably relevant as well. So I think the card does have some things going for it. But when I compare it to other, even white 5-drops, I'm not sure how much I like it. Like I think I might like Angel of Invention more than this. I think this beats Angel of Sanctions likely, but Angel of Sanctions is removal twice, so that's probably good. I think Regal Caracal might be better too, so it all depends. I mean, a 5/5 flying first strike lifelink is really hard to ignore. That's going to lead to these huge life swings, and it's really hard to kill it in combat. It kills everything. It's got first strike, and it gives, passive bonus to other creatures. That probably won't happen too often, because this looks like it'll just be a finisher, in a white deck, but I'm just not 100% sure with all the other power at the 5-drop slot in standard, not even just in white, but like a bunch of other colors. Scarab God's another good example. That this sees all the play in the world. But, I mean, hey, it flies over Scarab God, kills Glorybringer, can't be Glorybringer, kills Aethersphere Harvester. It's like, in a way, one of the biggest, baddest flyers in the upcoming format, so it's possible that this thing is actually insane. So I'm not going to say that it is, but I'm also definitely not going to say that it isn't. This thing could be ridiculous. But up next, another legend, you guys. This is Baird, Steward of Argive. It's 4 mana, 2 and 2 white. For a 2/4 human soldier, it's legendary. It's got vigilance, and creatures can't attack you or planeswalker you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. This looks specifically very good against mono red decks, obviously, or just really fast aggro decks. If you're playing against another white deck, like a white weenie deck, this looks really good too. So I actually like a lot about this. I was a little bit prepared to poo-poo on it when I first read it. I was like, it's not impressive. But the more I think about it, this could be at least a decent sideboard card, and white is a little bit thin at the 4-drop slot in the current standard, so I think that as a meta call, this could go in main decks, but it's more likely to see sideboard play just to hose aggro, because this does look like it hoses aggro pretty well. They can't, they have to boost Harness Lightning. They can't Lightning Strike it. They can't Abrade it. They obviously can't Shock or Magma Spray it. They have to Revolt their Fatal Push, and any other removal they have to spend 4 mana on. So at least everything else is at parity with it. Cast out, Vraska's Contempt and stuff. So I think that this card actually has a shot, but I think it's more of a sideboard piece than anything else at the end of the day. Up next is not a legend, actually. This is Seal Away. It's 2 mana, 1 and a white for an enchantment with Flash. Remember that. And when it enters the battlefield, exile target tapped creature an opponent controls until Seal Away leaves the battlefield. This is fantastic, you guys. This is, I think, instantly better than Baffling End. You can play it with Flash. That's incredible, and it still contributes to your Ascend count if you're interested in that at all. And you can play it alongside Baffling End, too. Like, White now has 2 good early game pieces of removal. And most creatures that you care about removing in the early game before you get to Fumigate and Settle the Wreckage and Cast Out are creatures that are going to be attacking you anyway. So, you know, when they go to attack you, the creatures are tapped down but before you declare blocks. Just flash this in, bada bing. That's, you know, an Earthshaker Kenra that you don't have to worry about. So, and that's actually a good play because they'll never be able to eternalize Earthshaker. So, I really, really like this card. Love that it's instant speed. It feels like it's really pushed. Like it wasn't instant speed at first, and they decided to push this. This is actually looking like one of the premier pieces of removal in the whole upcoming format, to me at least, at first glance. This looks ridiculous. It's going to make approach decks that much better. They don't have to play Baffling In anymore. They can play at instant speed, and I think that's just ridiculous. So Seal Away is actually looking like one of my favorite white cards because I'm a nerd for removal, and this is, on its face, a ridiculously good removal piece that even is great against every haste creature in the mono red deck. You know, it's amazing against Hazoret. And you can't say that about Baffling In. Baffling In is terrible against haste creatures. So, I mean, this has the edge on it over in that way, too. So I love Seal Away. This is looking ridiculously good to me. But up next is On Serra's Wings. This is 4 mana. That's a lot. It's 3 and a white for a legendary enchantment. Check that out. It's an aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature is a legendary, gets +1/+1, and has flying, vigilance, and lifelink. In limited, this thing is a boss. Like, Mark of the Vampire is good in limited, so I can't imagine that this won't be ridiculous and just completely win games in limited as long as you can protect that creature. They don't draw removal. So, yes to that, but probably nowhere near standard. Again, I probably like Squire's Devotion more than this. I guess with this you get Flying and Vigilance, but it costs you an extra mana, and that's way too much. 4 mana is so much for something you might get blown out on before it resolves. So I want to like this, but I don't. In limited, though, I'd probably play a copy of that, depending on what I'm in. But yeah, I'd probably do that. But up next, we finally get to talk about sagas. I said that we'd talk about sagas in a couple of cards like 10 minutes ago. But we're finally at sagas. This is History of Benalia. Or Benalia. This is 1 and 2 white, 3 mana in total for an enchantment. It's a saga. And the way these work is that you put lore counters on them when they enter the battlefield, and then after your draw step, which is weirdly worded. That's an odd time to do that, but I'm sticking with it for now. So the way this particular one works is, as this saga enters the battlefield and after your draw step, add a lore counter, sacrifice after 3. When you put the first lore counter on it, when it enters the battlefield, you'll get a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. And then on your next turn after your draw step, whatever that means, you'll create another token on that turn, 2/2 white knight with vigilance. And then on the third turn that it's in play, essentially, you'll get the third lore counter, you sacrifice it, and knights you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. And I really actually like this card a lot. This is another card that I was kind of like meh on at first, but the more I read it, the more I like it. It gives you at least 8 total power in all for your 3 mana. If not more than that, if you're playing the Knight deck, you know, you'll go Knight on turn 1, Knight on turn 2, and then, or 2 Knights on turn 2, possibly. And at that point, you're getting a lot of power out of this stupid thing. And I really like, by the way, that all these sagas, they do something the turn they enter the battlefield, so it never feels like a wasted turn. In this case, on your third turn, you get a 2/2 guy with vigilance, and then on your next turn, it feels as though you're getting a free 2/2 creature. So, like, even if you draw a land, you still got a creature on that turn. And 3 mana for 4 power, spread among 2 guys, spread among 2 turns, and the second turn is going to feel free. I think it's a great deal. And essentially on turn 5, the way this card works, you'll be able to get a really good attack step in, especially considering, on turn 1 and 2 you can play knights. Turn 3 you play this. Turn 4, not only will you get a second knight from this, but you can play another knight or 2 or 3, depending on what you have the mana for, or the cards in hand. So you can just get an unbelievable turn 5 attack step out of this. And it's not even a terrible top deck. Because, you'll get a creature that turn, and then it ensures that even if you get a bad top deck the next turn, you'll still get a creature. So I like a lot about this card. I think there's a lot more to it than there is at first glance, which I keep saying about these cards. The first time I read a lot of these, I wasn't that into them, but this and a lot more cards that I discounted at first are actually looking more better the more I check them out. So I'm not thinking this is going to shake the world or anything, but the Knight deck is actually looking pretty strong, honestly. So I'm looking forward to it. But up next is Healing Grace. This is just a white mana for an instant. It prevents the next 3 damage that would be dealt to any target this turn by a source of your choice, and then you gain 3 life. Actually, this is just better than Healing Salve. So if you wanted a strictly better card than a card from Alpha, here you go. This is actually kind of neat. I sort of like this as a combat trick in Limited, but it's probably not worth a deck slot ever. I don't think I want to play this in Standard. I don't even think I really want to play this in Limited, again, because this would probably be better if it were just a creature. If you play the creature over this, is what I mean, in a Limited deck. It would probably just be better. Gain life cards are not usually good. Prevent damage cards are not usually good. So I'm not saying this is awesome, but hey, better Healing Salve, so we'll take it. Up next, though, is another saga. This is Triumph of Gerrard. I don't like this one as much as History of Benalia, but in any case, Triumph of Gerrard is 2 mana. It's 1 and a white. And the first time you put a lore counter on it, when it nears the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control with the greatest power. You also do that the second time you put a lore counter on it. And then the third turn, which is, if you're doing this on curve, will be turn 4, just so you know. You will sacrifice it and have target creature you control with the greatest power gain flying, first strike, and lifelink until end of turn. I actually don't much care for this. You're getting a total of 2 power on the same creature, usually. And then that creature for 1 turn will get a decent attack step in, but it's just that creature. And usually, I would prefer if this were just a combat trick. Something like Mighty Leap, I think is just better than this, even like in Limited. But maybe I'm wrong, it's entirely possible. You'll be able to spread those counters out, because you might have 2 different creatures with the greatest power you get to choose. So, I don't think that this is awful, especially in Limited environments, but I really don't think this will touch Constructed. But anyway, we're actually almost done. We're moving on here to the next to last card. Let me take a sip of this delicious southern sweet tea, y'all. Hold on. Lip smacking good. Had to wet my whistle. But anyway, up next is Charge. It's the next to last card. It costs 1 white mana. It's an instant. And creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. That's the whole card, and it's kind of amazing that this never ever existed before. It's insane. It feels like that card should have definitely been a thing at some point, but somehow never was. I don't really get it, but I actually don't think this looks terrible. We do have Pride of Conquerors in the format. It's probably a better card, but just 1 mana for an Anthem effect that, if you play your cards right, this could probably get you, 5, 6 power, or on a board full of tokens, like way more even than that. So I won't discard this, or I won't discount this for just 1 mana. I don't know, there's something very appealing about it. Let me just say that. I think the Pride of Conquerors is probably the better choice, but I am not down on this, actually. I think that a lot of people are just going to pass this up and be like, ho-hum. But just 1 mana, if you were playing just a deck that just committed itself to white 1-drops and like maybe a couple of 2-drops, but mostly white 1-drops, you could push the land count down to like 17. And this could be one of your finishers, Or again, in a tokens deck, this is a great efficient use of your mana. But again, there's probably just better ways to use that slot. So I'm not 100% sure on Charge, but I don't know, man. There's something about it that calls my name. So I'm not going to give it up. Never going to give it up. Never going to let it down. But on to the last card here, and this is a good one to finish on. This is Fall of the Thran, you guys. It's 6 mana, 5 and a white for a saga. And when it enters the battlefield, you put the first lore counter on it, you destroy all lands. You just destroy all lands. They were printed Armageddon in Standard. Let that sink in. Sort of, they were printed Armageddon. But when you put the second lore counter on it, each player returns 2 land cards from their graveyard to the battlefield. And you'll do that again when you put the third lore counter on it and sacrifice it. So this is neat. It's an Armageddon that fixes itself, but it's still an Armageddon. And you can do the old trick, the old tried and true trick of like, you know, we used to go Birds of Paradise or Lana War Elves into Armageddon. You can still do that. You can use Mana Dorks to ramp into your Fall of the Thran. And then you'll have mana sources, which is pretty sweet. You can get to Fall of the Thran on like turn 4 with Mana Dorks. And then you can recover way faster than your opponent too, ostensibly. So you can still, we can do that again. That's going to be fun. And it looks pretty good with ramming up Excavator. I should probably mention that that card exists in Standard for until the fall at least. So yes, that's also probably going to be awesome. So, and it's also cool, by the way, that you get to use your lands again first. Sort of. You know, they can still use their lands to play instants before you, or I guess at the same time as you, but you get the chance to play, you know, creatures and sorceries and enchantments and stuff, planeswalkers, before your opponent does, at least on the face of the card. So that looks pretty awesome too. I like a lot about this. I think that there probably will be a deck that's based around getting to this as quickly as possible. Because if you get to this on turn 4 with Mana Dorks, you're in a really good position to take over the game from then, because you'll have maybe 4 mana on the next turn, or possibly even more. So, yeah. You know, there's Lana War Elves is back. I don't know if you guys know that yet, and that's going to be really hype, but I didn't want to save that for the green video, because the green video is going to be like the end of the week. But Lana War Elves is back. They have the stones to reprint that card, so we've got that. We've got Servant of the Conduit. We've got Drover the Mighty, all kinds of ramp. We've got Cultivator's Caravan. So I could definitely see this being ridiculous and able to get to as early as turn 4. So definitely want to try and build something around this, because if you can recover faster from Armageddon than your opponent, you usually win the game, or at least that's how it's always worked before. Hopefully it'll still work that way. Obviously, though, it's a step or two slower than most Armageddons. So, you know, aggro could still just wipe the floor with you if it goes up underneath this. So I think this is a fair Armageddon, definitely. But just fair enough to maybe still see some play. So I'm really excited about this card existing at all. But that's all 18 of the white cards that we have so far. We actually don't have every card in the set. We have 140 out of like 268 or 9. So we definitely have over half the set and most of the rares and mythics and stuff, but we definitely don't have all of the set yet. But that's all the white that we have. We're going to be doing this all week. White's today, blue is tomorrow, and then black, red, green, and then we'll do the gold cards and the artifacts and colorless stuff. So we got a whole week of this, and then after that we got some speculative deck building to do. So hang on, we have officially started Dominaria season, you guys. So if you like this video, there's going to be more like them. Make sure you like the video. Hit the thumbs up. Super low effort way to support the channel. You can also follow me on Twitter. If you haven't done that yet, you'll know when new videos coming out by doing that. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notes. That's the easiest way to know when new videos come out. Again, we're going to be doing this all week, and you probably want these. So go ahead and sub if you haven't done that yet. You can also support us on Patreon if you really want to do that. Patreon.com/SVMTG. Link in the description. $1 a month lets you know what videos we're doing the day before we do them. And you can check out my sponsor, TCG Player. I'll leave a link in the description for them. Super cheap Dominaria boxes, actually. I do want you to check out the link because it helps out the channel when you do that. And they like it when you click the link. They call me up and they're like, Dev, thanks, good job getting all them clicks this month. Here's some support. So, you know, click the link and that helps the channel out too. But in any case, I think I'm tapped out for this one. That's all I've got to say about the white cards, but we'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from the place. Thanks for watching my wizards. No matter what you do, spread love, be kind. Bye, guys.